This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Bill King is always totally wired on college football, and that's why we bring him on every Wednesday here on Halftime. Bill, how you doing? We're at the halfway point of the season. Can you believe it? 6 weeks in. It happened quickly.
Yeah, I'm not liking that part. I was talking about that this morning. The playing portion of the season goes so fast in college football, and you blink and you're halfway through. We're going to blink, and it's the last 2 weeks of November, too.
It's true. I mean, it's like talking season begins at the media days, right, which are like, what, the second to last week of July? And then you get 6 weeks of talking before there's an actual game to talk about, and here we are. We're at 6 weeks. It does. It happens incredibly quickly. So a disappointing outcome for Arkansas against Mississippi State. I think when you look back at this, when you look at Arkansas dealing without KJ Jefferson, banged up in the secondary more than they were the week before, and just from what I saw from Mississippi State, it's a really good team. And the more I look back at that game, the more I become less and less surprised at the outcome. What did you see in that game?
We talked about it last week. Circumstantially, it was a bad spot for Arkansas for any number of reasons. You laid a few of them out. Mississippi State's a very good team. They're as polished a passing team as you will play. And they also run the ball well, and they also will strike you on defense. You're a solid, well-rounded team, and you can't be better coached at quarterback than they are by Mike Leach. And Arkansas coming in there metaphorically limping, too. The disappointment from A&M. The Alabama game at home. It just did not look good for them heading to that game, particularly on the road.
Well, and Rogers was really good. I mean, you hit on the thing that to me feels like the difference for Mississippi State in any other year that we've seen them under Leach, or maybe any other year under Leach. It's their ability to run. But they also took advantage of the alignment that was put out against them. I'd be interested to see, first of all, how Kentucky plays them this weekend, and if they're able to run with any sort of success like they did against Arkansas. And this is a huge game for both programs. For Kentucky, they got to stop a little bit of the bleeding. And do we know the availability of Will Levis, as Stoops talked about that today?
Not that I know of. Now, I might not be in the loop on that today, but he's been in a boot. And it's iffy. Their situation behind him is not good. And one of the kids is a quarterback who played high school with my kids the last couple of years. He's a true freshman. He's not ready for that prime time. But that's a huge – we're waiting on Bryce Young, too. I mean, I think he's going to play in the Tennessee game. But there are various quarterbacks around that we're waiting on and unsure about.
Well, I mean, Jalen Milroe showed some things against Arkansas, but he also was awfully careless with the ball last week against Texas A&M. I mean, that felt like the reason the Aggies were even in the ball game. So, I mean, we've seen other years where the backup has come off the bench and led Alabama to a national championship. I don't think this year is that year.
He's not balanced enough. Now he's dynamic in the running game, and Jahmyr Gibbs is also dynamic. And together, they're even better. But the passing game suffers. And Tennessee's not going to score 20 points like A&M did. You're going to have to get points up there. And now, I'll tell you this. If you can play keep away, and Florida did that for about a quarter to Tennessee. If you can maintain possession of the ball and keep them off the field and dwindle that clock, and you wouldn't think Alabama would need to revert to that. But this Tennessee team can strike you in one play. I mean, last week, there's a turnover, and the next play it's an 80-yard bomb for a touchdown. They don't waste any time, and they don't worry about the clock either. And if it's 4th and 3, they don't care. It's almost nonchalant. So Alabama is going to need Bryce Young healthy, and they're going to have to get some points up, which they're certainly capable of. They're, about an 8-point favorite, which is probably about right.
Speaking of Tennessee, I mean, it feels like half the media across the league is ready to give Josh Heupel the Coach of the Year award. And it's funny how this works sometimes because nobody ever at the halfway point of the season says Nick Saban's the Coach of the Year. They're always looking at somebody else. And then by the end of the season, it's either him or Kirby Smart. So I'm not ready to hand anybody that award just yet.
Well, they still got that game. They still have Georgia. They got to go on the road to Georgia later. That they're going to be an underdog in that game. But I think if year 2 for Josh Heupel, considering the disaster he walked in on, I mean, an absolute catastrophe, capitulation would be a good word, and they're legitimately probably a 10-2 team. That's beyond anybody's wildest prediction.
Well, I mean, game day is in Knoxville at Neyland, and they're going to sell the place out. It's going to be wild. They'll have the Knoxville Navy ready to go and everything. And I mean, we were all fired up about it, and the buzz was in the air when the Crimson Tide visited Fayetteville. And everybody here thought maybe this is the year the losing streak ends. Well, it's now 16 straight losses to Alabama for the Razorbacks, and the Crimson Tide have beaten Tennessee 15 years in a row. But those have been, they've taken Tennessee to the woodshed in most of these games. Do you see any chance? If it's about Bryce Young, is that really what this game hinges on?
I think Alabama could still win the game. Obviously, it's Alabama, but they're not. They have superstar like Will Anderson on that, but their secondary is not. Tennessee's not worried about that secondary. Tennessee doesn't even have Cedric Tillman, their star wide receiver, healthy. He hadn't been around since the Akron game, and every receiver they have makes plays. Doesn't matter who they put in there. Every receiver they have is a threat to take it all the way. And Bryce Young's very important because it balances them up. Now, I don't think they're as good in the running game with him, but they're much more polished in the passing game.
Well, Volunteers might be without Jalen McCullough, the starting safety. He was arrested on Sunday, I guess, allegedly punched somebody in an apartment complex, and the kid fell down the stairs. So I guess his availability is up in arms too here. And that would be a pretty important piece of the Tennessee defense at the same time.
He's played a lot over 4 years for them. He's been around a long time, and they're looking into. I don't really know what's going to come of it. Now, here's the way they tell the story. He's in his apartment, minding his business. Some drunk guy who didn't know where he's going enters his apartment. And now here's where it gets fishy. The guy leaves the apartment, the drunk guy, and then he gets chased and beat up. So Tennessee fans are trying to square this one up right now. It's pretty funny. Vol Twitter, of course, is legendary. But if you want to see them defend him, just go to Vol Twitter.
Well, and also, too, not every situation is the same. I remember, a year or two ago, 4 Kentucky players were arrested, and you're really like, oh, what's going on with Kentucky and everything? And there were no charges. And in fact, I think they've ended up suing the police department in this case. So, you got to let these things play out. You always have to let them play out. So, let's see. 15 unbeaten teams that are left. Kansas dropped out of the ranks of the unbeaten last week because TCU beat them. And now TCU gets Oklahoma State. I had a listener say a couple days ago on our text line that he didn't see a loss for Oklahoma State on the schedule and thinks that they're a legit contender for the playoff. Maybe they are, but I'm looking at the schedule for Oklahoma State coming up. TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, Kansas. I see maybe one loss out of those games. So I'm not sure if I see Oklahoma State coming out of the Big 12. But then again, they came awfully close last year, if not for falling about a yard short in the Big 12 title game.
Correct. I've said I think they're the team to beat. Oklahoma is imploding. And not that they win Bedlam much, Oklahoma State doesn't, but they did last year, and they're going to be favored again this year. And I still think they're the team to beat, but that schedule you just reeled off is tough. There's no free lunch in that whole group. Kansas is a very good team. Kansas State, Baylor, TCU, all those teams are good ball clubs. So, yeah, you're right. I don't know they go through all that unscathed.
Here it was. Oklahoma had blown out Nebraska and started the year 3-0. They get ranked, and now they can't stop anybody. 3 games in a row, allowing 40 points or more, getting your head handed to you in the Red River rivalry. What's happened there in Oklahoma?
I'm not sure. There's good personnel. There's not great personnel there. They have some individual pieces like that. They're not at all fixed on defense by a defensive guru. And they're not even, usually the last X number of years, end of Stoops and with Riley, Even when they weren't playing good defense, they could still score 40 or 50 on you, right? Now they can't do that. They're bad on both sides of the ball, and that's a incredible problem. And with the injury to Dylan Gabriel, they're unstable at quarterback, and it's a big mess right now. It is a colossal mess that I don't think gets fixed this season.
So Ohio State, I saw, is now the favorite to win the national championship on Caesars Sportsbook. They got ahead of the two SEC teams. They've blown out 5 teams in a row. And, I mean, offensively, they kind of do look unstoppable right now. Do you think Michigan, once we get to that game, that's the only roadblock in front of Ohio State? Maybe Penn State, maybe?
They got to go to Penn State here in a couple of weeks. And they're off this week. I believe they get Iowa next, then Penn State. What separates them right now from the upper echelon chalk is that receiving. The quarterback, obviously, but it's the quarterback receiving core. The receiving core is by far the best in the nation. It is full of superior players. They're all spectacular playmakers. They're all nightmare matchups, whether it's physicality, whether it's verticality, whether it's speed. And that's what separates them right now between, I'd say, Alabama and Georgia. Now, I think it'd be unclear who would win between those three. It's probably dead even. But that receiving core is better, a significant notch better than Georgia and Alabama.
Last segment, Bill, where you got Bill King from Nashville Sports Radio here on Halftime. He's the host 6 to 9 on WNSR, King of College Football Talk. So Matt Rule, I mean, is it a foregone conclusion he's coming back to college? No NFL team is gonna hire him now, I would think, and he's engineered 2 really incredible turnarounds. And there's some programs out there that are going to need turnarounds, and there might end up being one of them into the SEC in Auburn. You see any way that Rule goes to Auburn, or do you think there might be a better landing place for him?
Here's my advice. I know Matt. I have not talked to him since he left for the NFL, but I've known Matt. He's getting, I'm told, $870,000 a month for 4 years. I'd sit around a year, charge the batteries up, get the brain unclogged, and look at the landscape. I mean, maybe in 2 years the Oklahoma job's open, right? Maybe in 24 that job's open. I'm not making that prediction, but I don't think I want to take on the Nebraska job right now. It's lost its sex appeal. Wisconsin would be a pretty good gig, but you're never going to get past Ohio State and some of those teams in the Big Ten East. I don't know if Auburn would be a good fit. Your 2 biggest enemies are Alabama and Georgia. If I'm him, I'm waiting. I'd wait a year. Do some TV maybe.
Does he have that kind of personality to be a TV guy?
I mean, I don't know if that's his love, but some of these guys, they at least want to stay in the game a little bit, so they'll do that to at least stay connected slightly to the game. But I don't really know what he wants. I would assume he does come back to college, yes, but I don't know which fit and match is his priority. You got to remember, when he was at Temple, did a good job there. He left to go to Baylor, and nothing wrong with that other than Baylor was just an absolute mess. And everybody thought, why in the heck did you take that job? And he'd never been to Waco. He did a really good job there. So, you know, what he's thinking may be totally different than what I'm thinking.
Sure. We got a text in here from Jody in Harrison. He says his favorite college coaches turned pro of all time, Pete Carroll, Dick Vermeil, and Jimmy Johnson. You know, Vermeil only coached a couple of years at UCLA, but that's before he got into the NFL with the Eagles. So who do you believe is the college head coach who has had the most success in the NFL? And I guess, I mean, I look at Jimmy Johnson because he won a couple of Super Bowls.
I'd say Jimmy Johnson. Yeah, I mean, winning big at Miami and then going there and winning a couple Super Bowls, I don't think anybody surpasses that. And the other part of that job is personnel is so vital. And, you know, he had personnel to work with. Some of these other guys, they get caught up in a situation where they're poor personnel people, or they just can't get personnel because of the way the NFL's run, and they're trapped and they can't win. It's another notch up, whether it's adjustments, whether it's coverages, whether it's development, and a lot of those college guys just can't do it.
Some of it's got to also be, Bill, that you can't, recruit your way out of a hole in the NFL. I mean, you're subject to the draft and free agency, and quite often players don't want to go to a bad, crappy team, And the other thing too is one of the things that's common in all of the really good college head coaches who failed in the NFL is that I'd say 95% of them didn't have a good quarterback in the NFL. I mean, that makes all the difference in the world.
No question. And there's only a few that make a difference. Only a few of those quarterbacks make a big difference. And then last as a difference maker, right? That's a hard combination, man.
Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.